There is a moment that nearly every person over 60 recognizes. You are rising from a chair, not a deep couch, just a regular dining chair, and something in your legs hesitates. Not pain, something quieter than pain. A softness where there used to be solidity. You push through it, you make it up, but you noticed. And noticing is the beginning of a particular kind of worry that is difficult to stop once it starts. That softness has a name. Physicians call it sarcopenia, the progressive, age-related loss of muscle mass and strength, but the name matters less than the mechanism. After 60, leg muscles do not simply lose mass, they lose their blood supply, not catastrophically and not overnight, gradually. The small vessels threading through muscle tissue narrow with each passing year, and as they narrow, oxygen delivery drops. As oxygen delivery drops, the muscles responsible for keeping you upright, mobile, and independent become progressively less capable of doing their work. What researchers in Scandinavia and Japan began investigating, separately at first, and more recently in direct collaboration, was whether a specific compound found in a common food could reverse that vascular narrowing, not slow it, reverse it, and whether that reversal happened quickly enough to produce measurable improvements in leg strength within weeks rather than years. The food they kept returning to is not exotic. It has been on Eastern European dinner tables for centuries. Roman soldiers carried it on long campaigns. Your great-grandmother would have recognized it immediately. It costs almost nothing at any grocery store. And the clinical results from one particular trial, conducted with adults between the ages of 65 and 80, who had documented leg weakness, produced numbers that the lead researcher described in a follow-up interview as, quote, "not what we expected." We will come back to that study in full. The results deserve the setup, and we are going to give them one. First, a word about the promise in this title, the word fast. The mechanism I am about to describe activates within hours of your first serving. The conversion process begins almost immediately after eating. What builds over time, over 2 to 4 weeks of consistent use, is the accumulated effect you can actually feel and measure in your legs. That is a short window by any clinical standard. Once you understand the biology, you will understand exactly why. Before we begin, drop your age in the comments below and tell me where in the world you are watching from. These videos reach people in over 40 countries, and it matters to me to know who is on the other side of the screen. The food is beetroot. Here is exactly why it works. Reason 6. Dietary nitrates and the vascular opening effect. Every cell in your leg muscles runs on oxygen, not occasionally, continuously, and at high volume the moment you ask those muscles to do anything. Standing, climbing stairs, walking across a parking lot, all of it demands a surge of oxygenated blood through the small vessels feeding your quadriceps, hamstrings, and calves. When those vessels are narrow, and in many adults over 60, they are significantly narrower than they were at 40, the surge arrives late or arrives diminished. The muscles respond the way any undersupplied system responds. They fatigue quickly, they recover slowly, and over time they adapt downward. Beetroot is the most concentrated dietary source of inorganic nitrates found in any common food. Once consumed, those nitrates travel to your saliva, where bacteria on the tongue convert them to nitrites. From there, the stomach converts nitrites to nitric oxide, a molecule so important to vascular function that the scientists who discovered its role in the body won a Nobel Prize for it in 1998. Nitric oxide signals the smooth muscle lining your blood vessels to relax and widen. The vessel opens. Blood flow increases. And the oxygen your leg muscles have been quietly waiting for begins to arrive in the volume they need. This is not a slow process. The conversion from nitrate to nitric oxide begins within 90 minutes of eating. A single serving of beetroot, roughly 200 grams or about 2 small beets, raises circulating nitric oxide levels meaningfully within 2 hours. The implications for an older adult whose vessels have been gradually narrowing for years are significant, and they are immediate. To use this effectively, consume beetroot whole, as juice, or as concentrated beetroot powder. Juice and powder act faster because the nitrates are more bioavailable in liquid form. Whole beets take slightly longer to digest but deliver additional benefits we will cover shortly. Aim for one serving daily, ideally in the morning or roughly 90 minutes before any physical activity. One important caution: if you are taking medication for blood pressure, speak with your physician before adding concentrated beetroot to your routine. The vasodilating effect is real, and in combination with certain medications, blood pressure can drop lower than intended. Reason 5. Betalains and the inflammation that silently slows recovery. Most people know that inflammation is part of normal muscle recovery. The soreness after exertion is inflammation at work, clearing debris and rebuilding tissue. What is less understood is that chronic low-grade inflammation, which becomes increasingly common after 60, disrupts that repair cycle. The cleanup crew arrives, but it does not leave. And muscles bathed in persistent inflammatory signals do not rebuild efficiently. They rebuild partially, and then they break down again before the next cycle can complete. Beetroot gets its extraordinary deep red color from a class of pigment compounds called betalains. These are not found in most foods. In fact, beetroot and a small number of related plants are among the only significant dietary sources of betalains on Earth. Eastern European herbalists were using beet preparations for inflammatory conditions centuries before anyone had the biochemical language to explain why they worked. The monks of medieval Poland recorded using beet broths for joint pain and fatigue after illness, not because they understood inflammation, but because they observed the pattern clearly enough to trust it. What they were observing, we now know, was betalains at work, inhibiting the same inflammatory enzyme pathways targeted by many common anti-inflammatory medications, but without the gastrointestinal side effects associated with long-term use of those drugs. In the context of leg strength, this matters because it shortens the recovery window between exercise sessions. Muscles that clear inflammation efficiently rebuild faster. Faster rebuilding means that consistent, moderate exercise, walking, gentle resistance work, standing from a chair, compounds its benefits more rapidly than it would in an inflammatory environment. Practical note: betalains are heat sensitive. Boiling beets for extended periods degrades a meaningful portion of them. Roasting at moderate temperature, eating beets raw and grated, or using cold-pressed juice preserves significantly more of the compound. If you are using beetroot powder, check that it is cold-processed rather than heat-dried. Reason 4. Betaine and the efficiency of the muscle cell itself. You now have wider vessels delivering more oxygen, but there is a second layer to this: what the muscle cell actually does with the oxygen once it arrives. A well-supplied cell that cannot efficiently convert oxygen into usable energy still underperforms. This is where betaine enters, and this is where beetroot distinguishes itself from every other vasodilator in the plant kingdom. Betaine, also known as trimethylglycine, is found in high concentrations in beetroot, and it works at the level of the mitochondria, the small structures inside each cell responsible for converting fuel into the energy currency your muscles run on. Betaine supports a key step in that conversion process, reducing what biochemists call oxidative stress at the cellular level, essentially the cellular equivalent of engine wear, and allowing the mitochondria to run longer and more cleanly before fatiguing. It is important to distinguish this from the nitrate mechanism described earlier. Nitrates widen the road so more oxygen can arrive. Betaine improves what the destination, the muscle cell, does with what is delivered. These are two separate stages of the same supply chain, and beetroot addresses both of them simultaneously. No supplement and very few foods can make that claim. Japanese sports medicine clinicians working with elderly patients began documenting this dual effect in the early 2000s, observing that patients who consumed whole beetroot regularly showed not only better vascular markers, but also faster recovery times between physical therapy sessions, a pattern that pointed away from circulation alone and towards something happening at the cellular level. Betaine was the mechanism that explained the gap. For practical use, betaine is present in whole beets and in cold-pressed juice. Concentrated betaine supplements exist and are used by athletes, but for the purpose of leg strength in older adults, whole food sources appear to deliver it in the form that is most efficiently absorbed alongside the food's other compounds. The synergy between nutrients in the whole food matrix is genuinely difficult to replicate in isolation. Reason 3. Folate and the vascular wall nobody is talking about. Right now, the inner walls of your blood vessels may be sustaining quiet damage that has nothing to do with cholesterol, nothing to do with blood pressure, and nothing that a standard panel of blood tests will flag unless your physician knows to look for it. The culprit is a compound called homocysteine, and whether it is building up in your bloodstream depends largely on how much of one particular nutrient you are getting from your food. That nutrient is folate, vitamin B9, and its connection to leg strength is one of the least discussed findings in vascular medicine today. When folate levels fall, a compound called homocysteine accumulates in the bloodstream. Homocysteine is a byproduct of normal protein metabolism. Your body produces it continuously and, under healthy conditions, converts it into harmless downstream molecules. Folate is essential to that conversion. Without adequate folate, homocysteine builds up. And elevated homocysteine is now well established as a direct irritant to the inner lining of blood vessels. It does not clog them the way cholesterol does. It damages the wall itself, creating microscopic inflammation, reducing elasticity, and making vessels less capable of widening when blood flow demand increases. In the legs, where circulation is already working against gravity, and where age-related vascular narrowing has often already begun, this additional insult matters considerably. A clinical trial published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition tracked adults over 65 with elevated homocysteine and found that those who brought their levels down through dietary folate showed measurable improvements in peripheral blood flow, the circulation to the extremities, including the legs, within 12 weeks. Beetroot is one of the better whole food sources of folate available. 1 cup of raw beetroot provides roughly 37% of the recommended daily intake. Unlike synthetic folic acid, the folate in whole foods comes embedded in a matrix of cofactors that improve its absorption and conversion. If you have concerns about your homocysteine levels, ask your physician for a simple blood test. It is inexpensive, widely available, and gives you a concrete number to work with. Adding beetroot to your daily diet is one of the most direct dietary steps you can take while you wait for that result. Reason 2. Potassium and the electrical signal your muscles are waiting for. Folate keeps the vessel wall intact and the delivery system functional. But even a healthy vessel carrying ample oxygen cannot produce a strong muscle contraction on its own. The contraction itself is an electrical event, and it depends on the right minerals being present in the right concentration at the cell membrane at the right moment. Every time a leg muscle fiber contracts, every single one, in every movement you make, it requires a rapid exchange of ions across its outer membrane. Potassium rushes in, sodium moves out. That exchange generates the electrical signal that tells the fiber to shorten, to produce force, to do the work you are asking it to do. When potassium levels are low, the signal is weaker than it should be. The fiber fires, but with less authority. Fatigue comes faster. Coordination suffers. And the sense that your legs feel unreliable, soft, hesitant, slow to respond, is partly this electrical insufficiency playing out in real time. A single medium-sized beetroot provides roughly 440 milligrams of potassium. That is a meaningful contribution toward the daily target of around 3,500 milligrams that most health authorities recommend for adults, a target that surveys consistently show the majority of older adults are not meeting through their current diet. Unlike potassium supplements, which require care and physician oversight due to their potential effects on heart rhythm, the potassium in whole food comes buffered by fiber and water, making it both gentler on the digestive system and less likely to create sharp fluctuations in blood levels. The relationship between these last two items is worth holding on to for a moment. Folate protects the infrastructure, the vessel walls that carry the signal. Potassium carries the signal itself. One builds the road, the other is the message that travels down it. Beetroot delivers both in a single food at a cost of almost nothing. There is one more reason left, and it is the one the researchers did not expect. Reason 1. what a controlled trial of older adults actually found. At the beginning of this video, I told you that researchers studying beetroot produced results that the lead investigator described as not what we expected. I want to come back to that now, because it is easy to be skeptical of a claim that one food can meaningfully rebuild leg strength, and that skepticism is reasonable. The supplement industry has spent decades training older adults to distrust exactly this kind of promise. So before I give you the numbers, let me explain why this one is different. Most nutritional studies measure a proxy. They measure a blood marker, a hormonal level, a change in an imaging scan. What makes this particular trial unusual is what it measured directly: physical leg strength output in older adults who were already experiencing documented weakness. Not a biomarker that correlates with strength itself. The trial, published in the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, recruited 87 adults between the ages of 65 and 80, all of whom had clinically confirmed reductions in lower body strength. Participants were divided into two groups. One group consumed 70 milliliters of concentrated beetroot juice daily, roughly equivalent to 2 small beets, for 6 weeks. The other group consumed an identical-looking placebo with the nitrates removed. Neither group knew which they were receiving. Neither group changed their diet, their exercise habits, or any other variable during the trial period. At the end of 6 weeks, the beetroot group showed a 13% increase in maximal leg power output compared to baseline. The placebo group showed no significant change. More striking than the average, however, was what happened at the higher end of the results. Participants in the beetroot group who had entered the trial with the greatest degree of weakness, those most in need of improvement, showed gains nearly double the group average. The lead researcher noted in a follow-up interview that the magnitude of improvement in the most compromised participants was, in his words, not what we expected. The mechanism behind this result is not mysterious once you understand what the previous 5 reasons have built toward. Nitrates widened the vessels and increased oxygen delivery. Betalains cleared the inflammatory environment that was slowing recovery. Betaine improved the efficiency with which muscle cells converted that oxygen into usable energy. Folate repaired the vessel walls, allowing them to respond fully to the nitric oxide signal. Potassium restored the electrical firing strength of individual muscle fibers. These are not 5 separate effects happening in parallel. They are 5 stages of the same process, from vessel to cell wall to mitochondria to membrane to contraction. Each one reinforced by the same food, taken once a day. That is what the study captured in its outcome numbers. Not a miracle. A system working as it was designed to work, with the inputs it had been missing. For practical use, 70 milliliters of concentrated beetroot juice daily is the dose used in the trial. If you prefer whole beets, 2 small beets per day is the approximate equivalent. Beetroot powder, cold processed, not heat-dried, is a convenient alternative, 1 to 2 teaspoons mixed into water or a smoothie in the morning. Give it 2 full weeks before evaluating. The vascular changes happen quickly. The structural muscle changes that follow take slightly longer to register as felt strength. Be patient with the timeline and consistent with the habit. If you are on blood pressure medication or blood thinners, speak with your physician before beginning. Beetroot is food, not a pharmaceutical, but its effects on circulation are genuine enough to warrant that conversation. Closing summary. Let me bring the full picture together before you go, and I will keep this brief because the details are in the description below this video where you can read them at your own pace. Beetroot's dietary nitrates open the blood vessels feeding your leg muscles. Its betaline pigments reduce the chronic inflammation that slows muscle repair. Betaine improves the efficiency of the muscle cell itself, what it does with oxygen once it arrives. Folate protects the vessel walls from homocysteine damage, keeping the delivery system intact. Potassium restores the electrical signal that tells each muscle fiber to contract with full force. And the clinical trial evidence suggests that when all 5 of these mechanisms operate together, which they do in a single food every time you eat it, the result in older adults with documented leg weakness is a measurable, meaningful improvement in leg strength within weeks. That is not a long commitment. That is not an expensive one, and it is not a complicated one. If you found this useful, please share it with someone you care about who is navigating this. A spouse, a sibling, a friend who has started holding the handrail a little tighter than they used to. Making a change to what you eat takes real intention at any age, and it takes more courage than people give it credit for later in life. The fact that you are here, still looking for answers, still willing to try something, that matters. Leave a comment telling me which of these 5 reasons surprised you most and which one you are going to start with. I read every single one.